I'm not surprised at all that like Black women are stepping up in the ways that we are, but I am surprised in that like so much of it is us centered, right? Like I definitely feel like so much of what Black women's labor has really been, of course it benefits us, but it also benefits like the larger good. And I feel like now a lot of our efforts are like, okay, if the rest of y'all benefit, then fine, but we really are looking out for us.
Welcome, honeys in training, and all of those who love us. I'm Felicia Pride, writer, filmmaker, and founder of media and production company Honey Child, where we tell stories that speak to Black women of a certain age with love. And you are tuning into one of our things, It's Good Over Here. It's Good Over Here is your ticket to the delicious adventures in Honeyland. It's a celebration of how good it can get on the other side of 40 across career, life, and love. In each episode, we offer inspiration and insight on aging boldly because, honey, it is good over here. Hey, honeys. I am so excited about today's episode. I have with me clinical psychologist, speaker, author, and media personality, Dr. Joy Harden Bradford. She's the founder of the critically acclaimed online platform Therapy for Black Girls, which if you are not on Therapy for Black Girls, it is a must, and it's dedicated to encouraging the mental wellness of Black women and girls. Dr. Joy also hosts one of my favorite podcasts of the same name, which won an NAACP Image Award, as well as a Webby Award and an Ambie Award. Okay, it is award-winning. And her new book, Sisterhood Heals, The Transformative Power of Healing and Community, explores the significance of building and nurturing Black female friendships and how these relationships have the capacity to enrich our minds and feed our souls. I am so excited to have Dr. Joy with us here today. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on It's Good Over Here.
Thank you. It's definitely good over here. So good to be with you.
It is, honey. Yes, it is. So I don't know if you know this. I want to kind of talk a little bit about our history, but I actually found my therapist, Dr. Ty, on Therapy for Black Girls, on the directory that you have.
Wow.
And we have been together for 7 years.
Oh my gosh. So you almost started as soon as the directory.
As soon as that directory hit, honey, I was in it. I was in it. And I have to tell you, our relationship, I talked to Dr. Ty last week. I've been consistent monthly for the last 7 years, and I attribute a lot of my success to my time in therapy and my time with Dr. Ty. So I just have to thank you for your directory and the work that you do, because I had tried therapy before and it didn't work out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I tried it a few times. This time, it just clicked. It just clicked. Love it. She is amazing and you are amazing. So I just had to tell you that the work works and the work that you are doing is amazing.
I love that. That's always my favorite compliment to hear when somebody says they have found their therapist in the directory. I love that.
Yes. And then cut to few years later, I was so honored to be interviewed by you on your podcast, Therapy for Black Girls, for my first short film, Tender. And the fact that you saw me as a director, saw me in that film, it just was such an honor for me. So I'm just fangirling right now. I'm a longtime fan of your podcast. You're like a podcast OG. So this is very full circle for me.
Well, thank you. Mutual fangirling, I like to say.
So I'm excited, Dr. Joy, to kind of dig into more of your story, how you came to be in this space and launch Therapy for Black Girls. So you went to school in the South, right? Louisiana and Arkansas, and you have a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation counseling. You have a doctorate in counseling psychology. You know, most of us went to school for something wildly different than our current career. And it sounds like you kind of always knew. Did you know that you wanted to be doing this work?
So I knew that I wanted to do psychology. I initially thought that I would be a professor of psychology. But then I had the chance to shadow a professor and was like, yeah, I don't really think I want to do this. So the psychology piece I loved. I did not love the classroom management and helping students stay on track. I was like, this is not for me. But then I had a chance to shadow an actual therapist and I was like, oh, this feels much more in line with what I think I would like to do.
Okay. So how long then do you still have private practice, or are you now you still?
I do still have a couple of clients who I still see virtually.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I mean, you're now like a professor of all of us, right? Like it's interesting how the
Right, the
teaching
classroom
kind of
is much
morphed a little bit.
larger.
Yeah, the classroom is the world.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about just like your philosophy on therapy. What do you see as uh, how do you define therapy, and what do you see as the purpose in our that therapy plays in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think therapy is really just an augment to being human, right? Because the
Mm,
human experience is one of like trials and tribulations and fun and drama and like just the entire human experience. And so I really see therapy as a supplement or a complement to just living as a human. It is an excellent
mm,
way to gain insight that it may be difficult for you to gain otherwise, but also a great tool to lean on when things get really difficult. And so, I think a lot of people think about therapy only when times are difficult, but I also think therapy can be incredible when you're not having such a difficult time.
yes. Yes. That's how I think I'm at that stage now where sometimes I'm like, do I have anything to talk about in therapy? Then I get in therapy and I'm like, I do. I still have things to talk about. And they may not be as sad as they were, 7 years ago, but
Right.
the growth is still happening. I love that. So
Yeah.
what made you go into therapy then originally,
So I think it
or
was the
psychology?
shadowing. Yeah, it was the shadowing experience, but I actually had a chance to take psychology in high school. So I'm dating
Okay.
myself because it was a satellite class. So they would roll this big TV in and we would watch this man like give us these lessons. I don't even think he was live. I think they were probably recorded. But we did this and, we took tests on paper or whatever. And I really fell in love with psychology. I didn't know that there was like a way to study my curiosity
Mm,
just in human behavior. Like you mentioned, I was raised in the South, so I spent a lot of time on my grandmother's front porch, just kind of watching
mm.
people and like being very curious about human behavior. And so when I found out there was a way to actually study that and like make that your career, I was like, oh, this is definitely me.
I love that. So how do you define your approach to therapy with your clients?
So my approach is really grounded in my relationship with the client. So I am looking at the ways that my clients are interacting with me in therapy and then using that as like a litmus to how are you actually interacting outside of here, right? So let's say, my client and I say something and they disagree with what I have to say. Like, is it hard for them to say
Mm,
that they disagree with me? Because it's likely then that they have trouble maybe asserting themselves outside of the therapy office. And so it is
mm.
really about building an authentic relationship that they can then practice some new skills with that they then take outside of the therapy office.
I love that. So walk me through the timeline a little bit. You get your doctorate, you have your practice. At what point does the idea for therapy for Black girls come about?
Yeah, so let me see. What is the timeline? So I graduated in 2000. When did I graduate? I graduated college in 2000. I think I graduated with my PhD in 2006. And so
Hmm.
after that, I did not immediately go into practice. So my longer mental health history is in college counseling. So I was at Georgia
Oh.
Southern University, at the University of Georgia, Virginia Commonwealth. So I've been on lots of university
Oh
campuses.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and my most immediate job before Therapy for Black Girls was as the director of the counseling center at Clark Atlanta University. And so,
Okay.
yeah, so I think it was during that
CAU.
time. Right, right. I loved being at an HBCU campus. It was just so much fun. Well, I graduated from Xavier, so I had spent time there as a student, but then being on the
Yeah.
faculty staff side, I think was a whole new world. So it was a lot of fun. When did I get the idea for it? So I got the idea for Therapy for Black Girls after watching Black Girls Rock on BET. So I was
Oh.
watching in my living room and thinking like, oh, this is so cool. Like, women were giving each other flowers and like celebrating women. And a lot of times you only see like entertainers celebrated, but this was like women in
Yeah.
policy and women in
Yeah.
education. And it was just such a cool experience. And I was like, wow, how could I capture like some of this same energy for Black women related to mental health? And so I jumped on GoDaddy and the domain was available and I started with a blog. So Therapy for Black Girls actually started as a blog with me just talking about, like how do you find a therapist? How do you make the most out of your support system? Just
Mm,
general mental health kinds of topics. And
yeah.
I think that really is a natural extension of my work as a college counselor because a lot of what we did was outreach, right? So talking to the students about how do you, do a good job of like resolving disagreements or how do you
Yeah.
handle roommate stuff or your first breakup, right? Like, so lots of psychoeducation. And that is what I saw the blog is initially.
Oh, that's amazing. So that was around what year was that?
2014.
2014. Wow. Okay.
Mhm.
So you're just starting to blog. So you're not thinking that it's going to become what it's become. You're just like, I'm
Absolutely
just
not.
providing information.
Yes. And this was I was just kind of learning about blogs. Like I feel like blogs hadn't quite hit their heyday just yet. And so
Right.
I just saw a lot of people blogging, and like those were the early days of Twitter. And, so I was just kind of sharing information in the ways that I saw other people kind of sharing information. I had no inkling that I was like going to ever have this as my full-time job. Like it just seemed like a fun thing to do on the side of like my real work at Clark Atlanta.
I love that. So your work at Clark Atlanta is one thing that, we hear a lot is that therapy is still taboo in the Black community. Do you feel like that's true? Do you feel like you said outreach was part of what you were doing? Where do you think we are in terms of Black folks' relationship to therapy?
Yeah, I think we have come a very long way, but I still think that there's more work to do. I think
Mm-hmm.
because of the explosion of places like social media, there's been a lot more access to mental health topics, and like the idea that you could talk to a therapist about different kinds of things, a lot easier to connect with therapists because you see so many of us kind of like on social media. So I do think
Yeah.
a lot of that stigma has been chipped away, but I do still think that there's still a lot of work to be done, especially when we think about talking to maybe elders in our community about therapy, or,
Mm-hmm.
feeling kind of leery of telling our parents or maybe our grandparents that we're in therapy because they may not quite understand it. But I do think we have come a very long way.
That's great to hear because it's interesting. I was talking to a friend recently, and she's really kind of calm and chill, but clearly there's some family things there. And she had mentioned that she had never been to therapy, and I was like, and because I'm such a like advocate for therapy, I was like,
Right.
oh, it's something you should try. But for those honeys out there who have never been to therapy, what do you feel like are the first steps? Because I always say like it's kind of meeting therapists is kind of like dating.
Mm-hmm.
It might take some time. I think sometimes we meet a therapist, it's not a good fit, we give up. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like dating. What do you think are some steps that for the honeys who've never been into therapy but have thought about it, where
Mm-hmm.
can they begin? Where can they start?
Yeah, so I also use that analogy, Felicia, about like it
Oh,
is kind of like dating with better boundaries, right? Like definitely not
yeah.
crossing the boundaries. But it is a complicated process. And again, I think, it's different than like finding a dentist or like even your primary care doctor, because you probably don't see them that often, right? Like you see your
Yeah.
primary care doctor maybe a couple of times a year. And so if they're a good doctor, but they don't have the best bedside manner, you might like tough it out because it's like, oh, they're a really
Yeah.
good doctor, but you don't want to have that kind of relationship with your therapist, right? Like this is somebody you're
Mm,
likely going to be meeting at some point, maybe weekly, bi-weekly, like you mentioned, monthly. So with some regularity. And so you do want to actually have a good relationship. And there's tons of research that talks about, regardless of how therapists practice, so you hear all these acronyms thrown out, CBT, EMDR, like all these
right.
different things, regardless of any of those techniques, the thing that makes the most difference is the relationship that you actually have with your therapist. And so if it's not a good
Mm-hmm.
one, then you're not actually going to get the most out of therapy like you can. And so I tell people, first to start by asking for a referral. So just like we would say, like, oh, girl, who did your nails? Or, oh, I love your haircut.
Yes.
Like, can I get a referral? Ask your network if they can give you a referral to a therapist, because that could at least give you a good place to start in terms of like, oh,
Yes.
this is somebody who my friend trusts. So maybe this would work for me. So I think referrals is a great way. Also asking other health professionals, so your primary care doctors, your OBGYNs, also likely network with other mental health professionals and may have a
Mm-hmm.
list of people that they commonly refer to. Typically people refer to people who they like and trust with their patients. And so it also is
Yes.
a good chance that you might have a good experience with somebody who comes from a personal connection.
And how can people prepare for therapy if there is such a word, or I'm going to go to my first session? What should I be thinking about? What should I be looking for? What does that look like?
I also should add, Felicia, that we did make a guide to getting started with therapy for,
Oh,
for this
we're going to
for
put
this
that
just
in
this
the
type.
show notes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's therapyforblackgirls.com/GTGS, because it is, if you have not had anybody in your family who has gone to therapy, or like a girlfriend, or if you haven't talked to them about it, it is very confusing. Like, what am I asking this person? Like, how do I know if it's the good fit?
Yes.
And so you typically do get like a free 10 to 15 minute consultation with therapists that you're interested in. So you use a place like the Therapy for Black Girls Therapist Directory. Maybe you narrow it down to like 4 or 5 people who you read their profiles and you're like, oh, this person seems like they work with people who have my kind of concern, or I get a good vibe from this person. I'd like to hear more. So you typically then would schedule your consultation, and that's a chance for you to ask the therapist questions. So I would encourage you to ask things like, how many other clients that have my presenting concern do you work with? What is your educational background, if that's something that's important to you? Whatever other kinds of things are important to you, like how long are people typically in therapy with you? Do you take my insurance? Because that's another thing, right? Like,
That's
how
a
you
big
paying
one.
for it? Yeah. And so, it's an opportunity for you to get to know a little bit more about the therapist, but also for the therapist to get to know a little bit more about you, because we also want to make sure that you have a good experience. And so if on that consultation, you're talking about something that I don't really specialize in, and, maybe you've seen like me on the podcast and you're like, oh, they have a great personality, I'd like to meet with them. That might be great. But if they don't actually specialize or have expertise in working on the thing you are coming into therapy for, it may not be a great fit, even though you like their personality. So that is something to keep in mind, that you do want to work with a therapist who has specialization in the thing you're coming in for.
That is so helpful. That is so helpful. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if I asked any questions. Luckily, it worked out. Okay, so let's talk about therapy for Black girls in terms of what are some of the unique challenges you see with Black women, honeys in particular, Black women over 40. What do you see are some of the unique challenges? Because you have an entire community, you have your social platform, so you're in communication, contact, engagement with Black women and girls all the time. What do you see are some common threads that we are struggling with, that we are dealing with?
Yeah, that Superwoman cape is still very, very heavy. And a lot of
It's
us are
heavy,
still
honey.
resisting taking it off. And I think there's so much, this, Felicia, like there's so much in Black culture that kind of pedestals Black women for being strong, right? And kind of being the pillars of the community and never being shakeable and all of those things. And so in a lot of ways, that has become a badge of honor for a lot of us, right? Like it feels good to be praised in those kinds of ways. But I think we are just now starting to dismantle all the ways that is very heavy and can be very damaging to us as well. Like being martyrs and kind of always being the one to put yourselves on the front lines comes at a cost. And so I think now that we are having more of these open conversations from people about how they've struggled, or like, what, I don't actually have it all together, and that's okay. I think that, more and more people are kind of being able to look at that in their own lives and say, I feel like I'm doing too much, like I need to take some of this off my plate. So that's probably still the biggest one that I think a lot of Black women struggle with.
Ooh, child, I feel that so deeply. And and also one of the, for Honey Child, our ethos for storytelling is really to try to help Black women get free, which starts with us. The team of Honey Child starts with me. Like, I am on a freedom journey. And this podcast is one way to try to get through. Yes, we want to talk about adventures and bold living, but also vulnerability and things that we have been through. And I just realized, just for myself, being able to share and talk about and not be ashamed of certain things has really opened me up. It's really, really opened me up. So I love that. So talk about therapy for Black girls, all the things that you're doing with this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful platform.
Yeah. So, you've already talked about the podcast, which is kind of like the center of the Therapy for Black Girls universe. So it is the thing that has kind of grown the brand, both that and the Therapist Directory. And the podcast continues to be like this really fun journey of really bringing mental health topics to people in ways that are really accessible. So I love, we were having a little side conversation about Carla from Bel Air. Like, I love being able to kind of fuse pop culture with psychology, because I think that there are lots of ways that pop culture kind of permeates our lives, and it makes mental health topics a little more accessible, and like, oh, we can talk about like Olivia Pope from Scandal and like all the things she may be struggling with, but how also do I show up as Olivia Pope in my life, or my friends, right? And how can we talk about this character without it feeling maybe as threatening? So I love being able to do that. I love that we've been able to play with so much pop culture on the podcast. We're also launching our Patreon community this week.
Yes,
so
let's
that's kind of fresh. Yes. Yeah. So, we always want to have places for like our community to gather, but there are also
Mm-hmm.
like just tons of things I'm interested in and curious about that there's just not space to talk about on the podcast. And so Patreon will be an opportunity for us to kind of dive into more of that, but also give our community a way to connect with one another. And then the
Yes.
therapist directory is continuing to grow. So again, I,
Yes.
I love that so many sisters, like their first words to me is, "Oh, I found my therapist in your directory." Like, I love that, like this Google sheet that started 7 years ago, is something that has helped so many women kind of get closer to this freedom that
Yes.
you talked about.
Yeah. So let's talk about this because what you're building is like this complete, it's really a media company. I don't know how you
That is
frame
something
it,
I'm
but
realizing, Felicia. I'm like, what? I'm not a media person. Like, how did I get into this?
you have an entire media company. So let's talk about like how you take care of yourself and how you enact boundaries because I know you're very visible online. You have a very large presence. How do you manage being visible? How do you manage building a company? How do you manage being a therapist, having clients? How are you balancing and managing all these things?
Yeah, as you say that, I'm like, "Ooh, that's a lot." But something I think that has been a blessing, but also like there's a downside to it is because like my face was so prominent on Therapy for Black Girls,
Mm,
like in all of the cover art and stuff, because it was just me in the beginning.
mm-hmm,
People still connect me to Therapy for Black Girls. And of course, I'm the
mm-hmm.
founder, but I have a team of like 12 to 15 team members who are actually
Yeah,
running Therapy for Black Girls. So yes, I'm still the host of the podcast, but there's a whole team of mostly sisters who are doing this incredible
yeah,
work to keep Therapy for Black Girls running. And so that has been the best thing that has happened to me, is being able to hire such an incredible team who actually kind of
amazing.
supports the vision and like is just as dialed in as I am, who just do
Yeah,
incredible work and keep the things running. So that has been the best thing for my balance and boundary setting,
yes,
is having a team of people. I am
yeah,
usually the one commenting and like in my DMs, but so I am online enough to know that like that is how you keep the machine going, is that you got to kind of
mm-hmm,
keep popping up in people's algorithm. But I'm not
mm-hmm,
usually there like in real time, definitely. Because in the
yeah,
very beginning it was just me, and I care so deeply about this work and the
mm-hmm,
community I serve that it was leading to burnout, like being trying to be too many things to too many people. And really
yes.
having the team is what has allowed me to reinforce those boundaries.
That's great. I mean, because we talked about the Superwoman cape. So you are taking it off, you are delegating, you are letting go, you are
Yes.
trusting, which is
Yes.
amazing,
It's
amazing,
hard,
amazing.
but yes, yes.
Yes. So I'm always curious about like how therapists manage their own mental health. We are in a time right now that is chaotic, is
To say
one
the
way to
least.
describe it. And a lot of us are suffering and leaning on our mental health professionals. But who are you able to lean on in these times?
My own therapist. So I'm trying to think like how long I have been with her, probably 6 years at this point, because it was before the
Wow.
pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a lot of therapists have our own therapists, which is incredible.
Hmm.
And I honestly think you need to. Like, I think to be a solid mental health professional, you do need to know what it feels like on the other side of the couch, so to speak, or the other side of the
Hmm.
Zoom screen at this point. Because there
Hmm.
is a certain level of vulnerability and like things that you do have to get comfortable with to understand really what it's like for somebody to sit in front of you. But
Yeah.
having my own therapist has been incredible. And, as you were talking about like building this whole media company and like being an entrepreneur, which is not something that I really set out to do, that is a lot of
Yes.
what therapy has become for me. Is like entrepreneurship has
Mm.
like introduced all of these new, well, maybe not introduced some stresses, but also maybe highlighted like areas of
Mm.
perfectionism that I didn't really know were there,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
issues with like delegating and like control stuff. And I'm like, oh, so much of
Hmm.
my therapy is really related to me being an entrepreneur.
Right. Oh, child, that's my life. We could have a whole conversation about entrepreneurship for real. We
Yes.
could have a whole conversation. But what you're building is so beautiful, so impactful, so necessary. But I'm glad to hear that, you have protocols and practices in place to take care of yourself because that's so important.
Yes. Yeah,
I
for
want to
sure.
go back to, you mentioned pop culture. One of the things that I love about your podcast is, and I think even back to my Queen Sugar days when I was writing on Queen Sugar,
Oh gosh.
you would do podcast episodes about characters. I think you did a whole podcast episode.
Oh yes,
about
we
Nova,
covered
honey.
most of the characters on Queen Sugar.
And I remember we would listen to it, and my showrunner Anthony Sparks at the time would listen to it. But I want to talk about just like Black women, how they're represented on screen, and what we can kind of learn from these representations, or how we can sort of engage with these representations. Just want to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I love, and you know this more than anybody probably, like I love that we've been able to have such a variety of Black women represented, but it's still not nearly enough, right? Like I think, and that's so much of the conversation is like, there needs to be space for there to be mediocre Black girls represented on film, like high achieving, we represent all kinds of different walks of life, but I think we are still fighting for so many, like so few of these spots that we become over attached, I think, to a lot of the characters. And really,
it is so much. It is very stressful on the other side being in TV as a TV writer, because there's a lot of pressure and responsibility on how these characters show up on screen. And sometimes like you just want to have a messy ass character, but you have to think about how they show up and who she's representing and all these things. So yes.
That is why I think being Mary Jane, so Mary Jane Paul was one of my original favorites.
Shout out to Mara Brock-Akil.
Shout out to Mara, who is just giving us such like iconic work in this
and
genre.
She loves a messy lady, doesn't she? And we love her for it. I just love that. I mean,
because
that was one of my favorite shows. Messy, yes,
we are messy, and I feel like, at least to my memory, Mary Jane was the first time like we had been given space to be just that messy and like really reflect on some things that we would just prefer people not know about us, right? And so I just love those kinds of representations, because I do think it allows us to tap into parts of ourselves that we would really rather not.
I mean, it's interesting too, because I've seen across some of the shows that I've worked on that sometimes it's like not even us who's holding us back. It's like white folks who are being overly whatever. Protective is not the word, because that's not what it is. Being overly something where they're stripping us of our humanity to be messy. Like even as TV writers, as we are pushing for our characters to be in their full humanity, the powers that be are trying to pull us back. And for me, I'm like, well, they're not allowing us to have rage. They're not allowing us to be angry. They're not allowing us to do some of these things because of, racism. But so even as we are trying to push for more multidimensional characters, there's still this idea that Black people cannot be in their full humanity, or underrepresented populations cannot be in their full humanity. So
that's interesting that you mentioned that, Felicia, because it feels like even like in the character world, like Black women are being silenced, right? Like so that they can't, like we can't have an overabundance of Black women showing up in media in lots of different ways.
Silenced on screen, silenced the ones who are behind the scenes. Like the silencing is real, and that's why platforms like this, where we can talk as freely as we want, and actually like they're just important. They're important. Yes. They're really, really important. So I want to talk about your book. You embarked on a big adventure in 2023. That's when it came out. We don't know how long it took, because sometimes books are beasts. They can take years to write. But let's talk about it, because the book focuses on sisterhood. So I want to talk about why you were like, 1, I want to write a book. 2, I want the book to be about sisterhood. And 3, just your philosophy around sisterhood and Black women sisterhood.
So it did take much longer. So it came out in 2023, but the book was pitched, I believe, in 2020, because it was in the pandemic. So I pitched it, wrote it, all the things during the pandemic. So I figured at some point I would write a book, but I wasn't always like quite sure what it was. And in 2020, we were actually anticipating our first Therapy for Black Girls in-person event, which was supposed to be called Sisterhood Heals. So Sisterhood Sisterhood Heals actually started, the vision for it actually started as an in-person event. And then, of course, we had to cancel it because of COVID. And so in conversations with my literary agent, we started to talk about, well, what kinds of things did you want to talk about that weekend? Like, what were your plans for what that experience would be? And that kind of became the outline for the book. And so I felt like Sisterhood felt like the way my agent talks about it is, you may write many books in your life, but if you had to kind of plant a flag in the ground and say, like, this is the first thing I want to talk about, what would that be? And Sisterhood felt like a very natural answer to me, because I feel like so much of the work that I do with Therapy for Black Girls and so much of my life really is just about sisterhood and the ways that Black women rally for one another. Like, just in the unlikeliest of places, there's always a sister, right? And so I just felt like when I think about like mental health and the ways that we have healed, even outside of a therapist's office, it is usually in the arms of one another, through supporting one another, rallying for one another. And so it felt like a very natural extension of what I wanted my first book to be.
I love that so much, because when I think about my own life, sisterhood is what has got me through. You know what I mean? And
So many times.
So many times it is. And I even look at my mom's life. Sisterhood is what got her through. Like, I think that's one of the things that the older generation has definitely modeled for us, is a feeling of sisterhood. And I don't think they get enough credit for that, because that's why we got a million aunties, right? Because I got so many aunties because they are my mother's friends.
Yes,
and the sisterhood is so real that I have to call them aunt, you know? And then I have cousins because the sisterhood is so real. So I love that you really wanted to anchor that for us. For sure.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, so much about like women's friendships, like this is, I feel like, an extension of the sisterhood conversation, but so much of women's friendships, I think, is often characterized as like frivolous, or like friendships are not the center of our worlds. And so I love that we are having now so many more conversations about, why can't friendships be the center of our world, right? Like, so much of it has been around romantic relationships, but like relationships with other women are very, very anchoring and like life-giving for so many of us. And so I love the idea that we are kind of recentering and like, narrowing our gaze on that part of our lives now, and like how full our lives are because of the sisters that are in our lives. And so I just think that provides such rich conversation, and I love that we're having more of those.
Absolutely, because I mean, a lot of us need that sisterhood in order to get through these romantic relationships. You know what I mean? So, like, if we really talk about what the center is,
exactly.
I love that. So, let's talk about then. You talked about female friendships, women friendships. What do you feel are some healthy portrayals of, or dynamic portrayals of sisterhood on screen in film, television, or do you have some favorites?
I feel like Issa and Molly is who I think about in terms of, like, because again, I think it was beautiful because you saw them, like, how their friendship evolved. But I also feel like the friendship breakup that we saw with Issa and Molly was one of the first we saw on screen also. And that, I think, is something that so many people resonated with, right? Like, again, this idea that friendship breakups don't have to be meaningful. Like, we have all this stock in like how to get over a romantic breakup, but friendship breakups are far more devastating, I think, for a lot of women than even romantic relationships. And so I love that we were able to see that on film. Going Back to Mara, with Girlfriends, again, gave us the classic foursome, and so I think that that was also a beautiful portrayal of just how different Black women show up in friendships with one another, and how, again, sometimes that gets really messy, but how can you come back to one another? The classic, like Joan and Tony, with the whole jealousy of Tony getting married first. Like, I think that is something else that happens in friendships that we don't always want to talk about, but is very real. And so I think that those are two of the examples I think of most often when I'm thinking about Black women's friendships.
Those are fantastic. And, Issa definitely really, part, I think, of her core of storytelling is friendships. If we think about rap shit, I just watched One of Them Days, just these friendships at the core of it, and how friends pull each other through, and that sometimes it's not always clean. And sometimes it gets a little messy, but at the end of the day, they find themselves back together in that way. So I think that's such a great core of her storytelling, for sure.
Yes. Agreed.
So I want to talk a little bit about just what you are excited about. You've done so much. You've written the book, you're building this beautiful media company and platform. What are you excited about these days? What are you excited about next?
Oh, well, because have not actually launched Patreon, I'm really excited about like how that will
Yes.
evolve. And, we already have an idea, of course, as a team, like the kinds of things we want to do. But a huge part of our brand is also bringing the community into that and like building with us. And so the ideas we have for it may look very different in a year when the community is like, no, we actually want more of X, Y, Z.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited to see how that evolves. I also am really excited about doing more in-person events because, again, we were just starting to kind of scratch the surface when we had the pandemic, and so had to hold off on that. And so last year we had our first in-person experience, which was our therapist summit. Well, no, we had our live show, which was our first live show, which was for,
nice.
just kind of, for the community of listeners, and then had a therapist summit specifically for our therapist community. So I'm really excited to do more of that. So the therapist summit is coming back again this year, but also looking at ways that we can get just the general non-therapist community out and interacting with one another, because that is something that came up a lot on the book tour, is that people are still feeling very isolated, like even in their own cities, and like it feels difficult to kind of connect with other people. And so I really want Therapy for Black Girls to kind of be a vehicle for people to connect with people in their areas so that they can build, sustainable support systems.
I love that. I love that. Well, this has been amazing. I just want to close out with one question, then we'll get into our special segments.
Okay.
I mentioned this chaotic time that we're in, but what are some just words of hope, words of support that you want to offer to Black women and honeys in particular?
I really would say to be very careful with your media consumption and lean into spaces that make you feel good, right? So like It's Good Over Here and other communities that Black women, I think specifically, are building. And I'm not surprised at all that like Black women are stepping up in the ways that we are, but I am surprised in that like so much of it is us centered, right? Like I definitely feel like so much of what Black women's labor has really been, of course it benefits us, but it also benefits like the larger good.
Yes.
And I feel like now a lot of our efforts are like, okay, if the rest of y'all benefit, then fine. But we really are looking out for us right now. And so I've just been so excited by what Black women are building right now. And, the types of communities, the types of advocacy and things that are happening. And so, of course, it is very easy to focus on all the awful things that are happening. But I also don't want us to lose sight of the incredible things that Black women in particular are stepping up and showing out right now.
Yes. Honey, that touched my heart. Thank you for those words. That touched my heart. I love that. I love that. Okay, so we are going to move into our pleasure principle segment. Two of our words, our favorite words at Honey Child, are desire and pleasure, and we define them very expansively. Anything that we want and anything that makes us feel good. So I want to talk about, how do you practice self-compassion, Dr. Joy?
Ooh, I feel like I do that through journaling, and really kind of giving myself permission to kind of, give myself grace for anything I messed up with throughout the day. And really my journal is a place that I go with all of that. So I think that's how I practice self-compassion most often.
I love that. What does pleasure seeking look like for you?
Ooh, the first thing that comes to mind is snowballs.
I love snowballs. I'm from Baltimore. We are a snowball town, honey.
Really?
Yes.
I wonder, so are they the same thing that I'm thinking, shaved ice with like the syrup? Is that what you're talking about?
That is exactly what it is. You get a little marshmallow on top. Yeah.
Oh, we don't do marshmallows. We don't do marshmallows.
You get a little marshmallows on top if you want. I don't do marshmallows myself. But yes, we are a snowball town. Actually, in my short look back at it, they're eating snowballs.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember that. I love that. Yeah, that feels like very connecting to like home for me, but also something that I like introduce my kids to, and it just feels like I always feel free and like grounded eating a snowball.
Yes, I love that. Tell us one of your deepest desires at this age.
Oh, I think one of my deepest desires is to learn how to swim at this point.
Oh, I love that. Now, do you get in water?
So with a life vest, or like if I'm in a boat or something, but like otherwise I will like dangle my feet or like go up to like my waist. Like I am not like putting my head under.
Smart.
But I feel very at peace in water and like surrounded by water. And to me, I want to do more of that, but I feel like to do it safely, I need to know how to swim. So I think one of my deepest
water
desires
is my happy place. I love to be in water. Oh, that's one of the things about living in LA is being close to the water. I feel like the water is very healing and you can let go of things in the water for sure. So I love that for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you swear by as a honey? It could be beauty, health, rituals, routines.
Ooh, I swear by a good time with girlfriends.
Yes.
We love a brunch, a brunch that goes way into the evening. Like we love those unplanned days.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So thank you. This has been amazing, Dr. Joy. Thank you so much for blessing us with you are so much joy. Like you're just such a delight. Like the name is so appropriate. You're such a delight. But the work that you're doing is so incredibly powerful. I can tell you're very modest about it. But it is changing lives. It has changed my life. I am a testament and a testimony to that. So thank you so much. This has been amazing just to hear your positivity around Black women and our growth and our mental health and helping us to continue to be good. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, of course, we know that we can follow you on Therapy for Black Girls, right? Mm-hmm. And you have your upcoming Patreon. Anything else that we can look forward to?
I think that's it right now. But again, if you go to therapyforblackgirls.com, you will find all of the resources and all of the announcements of things that we'll have coming up later this year. So that's probably the best way to stay connected with us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Joy.
Thank you, Felicia. It's been incredible to chat with you.
It's Good Over Here is a Honey Child thing. Honey Child is a media company that speaks to Black women 40 plus, honeys as we like to call them, across audio, digital, film, TV, books, and more. Don't forget to follow Honey Child on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at It's Honey Child. And visit our website at honey-child.com. For bonus content and other exclusive Honey Dip stories, subscribe to our Substack at yeshoney.substack.com. That's yeshoney.substack.com. Until next time, honeys, it's good over here. You coming?